Hey everyone, hope you're doing great. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we'll dive into what if Deku mastered Speed Force and became faster than Flash. Smash that subscribe button, and be sure to peek at the description below. Let's begin. The air in downtown Muzidafa tasted of ozone and fear. It was a cocktail Izuku Midoriya was becoming far too familiar with. Smoke, thick and acrid, billowed from the skeletal frame of a communications tower half a city away, a stark black plume against an otherwise placid blue sky. Screams echoed, not with the singular terror of a purse-snatching or a low-level mutant quirk rampage, but with the cacophonous, rolling panic of a coordinated assault. They called themselves the Null Collective. A new name on the Hero Intelligence Network, but one that had made its debut with terrifying efficiency. Their attacks were simultaneous, striking at infrastructure, civilian centers, and transit hubs. Their grunts were well-equipped, their tactics disciplined, and their ideology, from what little had been gleaned, was chillingly esoteric. They spoke of purifying reality and unmaking the flawed canvas. For Deku and his small, hastily assembled team, the mission was simple: hold the line at the Muzidafa Central Plaza, the city's commercial heart. It was a sprawling open space surrounded by towering glass and steel buildings, now a nightmarish maze of overturned trams, shattered storefronts, and terrified civilians. Todoroki, west flank, cut off their approach from the subway entrance. Tenya Ida's voice, crisp and authoritative even over the din, barked orders. His recipro burst propelled him in a silver-blue streak, a human battering ram clearing paths for fleeing families. Uraraka, aerial support and evac. Prioritize the upper floors of the Grand Hotel. Deku, with me. We need to suppress the vanguard. On it. Deku replied, the green lightning of one for all, full cowling crackling around him. He kept the output throttle to a steady 45%, a level that had become his reliable baseline. The power coursed through him, a familiar inferno he had painstakingly learned to control. It made the world move in crisp, manageable frames, allowing him to weave through chaos with practiced ease. He moved in sync with Ida, a green and blue whirlwind of controlled force. A villain with rock-like skin lunged, and Deku was already there, his iron-soled boot impacting the man's solar plexus with a concussive thump. A St. Louis smash, fueled by 45%, sent a blast of compressed air that scattered a trio of attackers who were trying to corner a group of shoppers. He was a protector, a shield, every movement precise and intended to neutralize without causing undue harm. Beside him, Shoto Todoroki was a force of nature. A colossal wall of ice erupted from the ground, glittering and formidable, blocking the subway entrance and sealing off a major reinforcement route for the Null Collective. Flames, roiling in brilliant orange, licked out from his left side, melting incoming projectiles and creating a perimeter of intimidating heat. Overhead, Achiko Uraraka was an angel of deliverance. Tapping windows and chunks of falling debris with her fingertips, she rendered them weightless, creating a bizarre, slow-motion ballet of destruction that allowed people trapped on high floors to escape. She would touch a terrified office worker, float them gently down to the street, and release her quirk with a cry of, "You're safe now. Go!" before rocketing back up with her wire equipment. They were a well-oiled machine, the next generation of heroes in action. But something felt wrong. The villains they fought were strong, but they were fodder. They were a delay tactic. They're too organized for simple grunts, Todoroki stated, his voice a low monotone as he flash-froze the ground, trapping a dozen more villains in place. They're stalling, forcing us to expend energy. As if summoned by his words, the air in the center of the plaza began to shimmer. It was like heat haze on an asphalt road, but it carried a nauseating, vertigo-inducing quality. The sound of the battle seemed to warp and bend around it, high-pitched screams becoming guttural groans, explosions sounding like wet fabric tearing. A man stepped out of the shimmer, and reality seemed to fold around his entrance. He was tall and lean, dressed in a simple, dark gray bodysuit that absorbed the light. He wore no mask, his face placid and unnervingly calm. His eyes, however, held a chilling emptiness, like two black holes. Heroism, the man said, his voice strangely amplified, echoing from everywhere at once. A futile attempt to patch a canvas that is fundamentally torn. You apply paint, where we intend to provide a new, clean slate. This was him. The leader. The intelligence reports had given him a name, Kajiro. Quirk, spatial tier. Ida, ever the first to act, charged. Your reign of terror ends now, villain! Kajiro didn't move. He simply watched Ida's reciprocal burst approach. Just as Ida's armored boot was about to connect, Kajiro slightly raised a hand. The space directly in front of him warped, creating a small, swirling vortex no bigger than a dinner plate. Ida's kick passed through it, and for a split second, his leg vanished from reality before reappearing a dozen meters behind Kajiro, kicking empty air and sending Ida stumbling off balance. Motion is a lie, Kajiro said, his voice devoid of emotion. Distance, a suggestion. Your power is predicated on a reality I no longer subscribe to. Todoroki reacted instantly, sending a massive glacier of ice surging towards him. The ice wall was a testament to his power, jagged and immense. But it didn't matter. As it approached Kajiro, its leading edge began to distort. The crystalline structure shredded, not melting, but unraveling. It was pulled into a dozen miniature vortexes that opened and closed in the air like hungry mouths, atomizing the ice into glittering dust. Deku felt a cold dread snake its way up his spine. This wasn't a power you could punch. How do you fight a man who can unmake the very space you occupy? His quirk is localized reality warping, Deku muttered, his analytical mind kicking into high gear. The world slowed as he processed the data. He's not teleporting or creating illusions. He's literally tearing and folding small pockets of space. The strain must be immense. There has to be a weakness. Kajiro turned his empty gaze on Deku, as if he'd heard his thoughts. The analyst. The inheritor of the broken pillar. You think in straight lines. A to B to C. I am here to teach you that you can be at A and C simultaneously, rendering B meaningless. He flicked his wrist. The air beside Deku twisted violently. Deku's danger sense, that strange, sixth sense gifted by the fourth OFA user, Haikid Shinomori, screamed. He threw himself to the side, the green lightning flaring as he pushed his body. A swirling vortex of nothingness, a perfect sphere of distorted light, appeared exactly where he had been standing. A piece of an overturned police car was sucked into it, and vanished with a sickening slurp. Not shredded, just gone. The fight devolved into a desperate dance. Every attack they launched was nullified. Every step they took was on uncertain ground. Kajiro was a ghost, untouchable, his quirk a perfect defense and a terrifyingly subtle offense. He wasn't trying to kill them. He was dissecting them, showing them how useless their power was against his. And then, his true plan became clear. With a grand, sweeping gesture of both arms, Kajiro's power erupted outwards. The shimmering effect intensified, but this time, it targeted two specific locations. The first was the base of the Atheon Tower, a 70-story skyscraper on the plaza's edge, its lower floors already structurally damaged from the earlier fighting. The support beams began to groan, not from weight, but from spatial shearing. Concrete and steel twisted like taffy, warping at impossible angles. The entire building began to list, a slow, majestic, and horrifying death sentence for everyone inside and below. Simultaneously, in the very center of the plaza where a grand fountain once stood, a much larger vortex began to form. It started as a shimmer and grew into a swirling maw of distorted reality, 20 meters wide. It pulled at the ground, ripping up paving stones and sucking them into its silent, hungry abyss. The sound it made was the most terrifying part. A low-frequency hum that vibrated in Deku's very bones, a sound that felt like the universe was fundamentally wrong. Uraraka screamed from above. The building. There are still people on the 5th floor. A daycare. Deku's blood ran cold. He looked up. Through a shattered window on the 5th floor, he could see them, the small, terrified faces of children, pressed against the glass, their teacher trying desperately to herd them back. The building groaned again, a final, metallic scream before it began its inexorable fall. He looked at the vortex. It was growing, pulling with more force, distorting the air, and threatening to swallow the entire plaza. Civilians still on the ground were sliding towards it, scrabbling for purchase. It was an impossible choice. A classic villain's dilemma, designed for maximum despair. He could race up the building, a 45% Manchester smash to stabilize the structure for a few precious seconds, allowing Uraraka and Ida to get the children. But in that time, the vortex would grow unchecked, consuming dozens of people. Or, he could focus his power on the vortex. A full power, directed blast of air pressure might disrupt the spatial distortion, but it would take everything he had. By the time he recovered, the Atheon Tower would be a tomb of concrete and steel. His mind, his super-fast analytical mind, ran the calculations 1,000 times in a nanosecond. There was no solution. Not at 45%. Not at 50%. He couldn't be in two places at once. He couldn't save everyone. The words of his mentor, All Might, echoed in his mind. You can't save everyone, my boy. But you must always try. But trying wasn't enough. Not here. Not now. Ida? Todoroki. The vortex. Contain it. Push it back. Deku yelled, his voice strained with desperation. He didn't wait for a reply. He made his choice. He looked at the children. He saw their fear. And in that moment, the years of ridicule, the dream that felt impossible, the awesome weight of the sacred torch he carried, it all coalesced into a single, defiant point of clarity. He was Izuku Midoriya. He was Deku. And he would save them. No matter the cost. I'm sorry, my arms, he thought, a silent apology to his own body. Forgive me. He deactivated the careful regulators of full cowling. The inferno of One for All wasn't just contained anymore. It was unleashed. Red, angry veins of power crackled over his skin beneath the green lightning. 60%. 80%. 100%. And beyond. He pushed past the pain, past the feeling of his muscle fibers screaming in protest, ready to tear themselves from his bones. He pushed past the limits of what a human body was meant to contain. He was gathering it all for a single, final, heroic act. A 1,000,000% Delaware-Detroit smash that would level the vortex and create a shockwave to push the building back upright, a desperate, body-shattering gamble. It was an act of pure, undiluted self-sacrifice. He was giving everything, his future, his limbs, his dream, to save those children and the people on the ground. And in that infinitesimal moment of ultimate, heroic intent, something in the universe answered. The vortex Kajiro had created, the tear in the fabric of space-time, became more than just a quirk. For a fraction of a second, it became a true dimensional fissure, a pinprick opening into the fundamental forces that governed all of creation. And through that pinprick, a consciousness made of pure energy, of motion and time, felt him. It felt Deku's incredible, stockpiled power, the energy of 9 generations of heroes. It felt his pure, selfless will, the burning desire to save others at any cost. It saw a vessel of unimaginable potential, a heart of unparalleled heroism. The Speed Force, a cosmic energy from a reality beyond their own, had found a new, worthy host. The world did not just slow down. It stopped. A sound like a bell the size of a galaxy being struck echoed, not in his ears, but in his soul. The burgeoning, self-destructive power of One for All within him was suddenly met by an outside force, an infinite river of kinetic energy that flooded into his very being. It didn't feel like a quirk. It felt like a fundamental truth. From the fissure, a bolt of lightning, impossibly vast and brilliant, erupted. It wasn't the angry red of Deku's overload, or the familiar green of full cowling. It was a searing, divine gold, shot through with emerald green. The bolt didn't strike Deku, it became him. To everyone else in the plaza, to Uraraka, Ida, Todoroki, and the villain Kajiro, what happened next was incomprehensible. One moment, Deku was crouched on the ground, glowing like a small green sun about to go supernova. The next, a flash of green and gold light so intense it bleached the world white for a second. It was accompanied by a sound that was not quite a sonic boom, but more like the crack of reality itself breaking and reforming. When their vision cleared, the world had changed. The children from the 5th floor of the Atheon Tower were now standing safely in the plaza's far corner, huddled together and confused, but completely unharmed. A lattice of glowing green-gold energy, like solidified light, braced the base of the tower, holding it perfectly steady. The massive, reality-eating vortex in the center of the plaza was gone, collapsed in on itself, leaving behind only scorched pavement. And Kajiro, The untouchable villain was on his knees, his dark bodysuit smoking. His hands and feet were encased in intricate, cage-like constructs of the same green-gold energy, pinning him to the ground. His placid expression was shattered, replaced by one of utter, mind-breaking shock, and his Zucchimidaria stood in the center of it all. He was no longer glowing. He was simply standing there, his head bowed. Then, like a puppet with its strings cut, he crumpled to the ground, unconscious. From Deku's perspective, there was no flash. There was only the stop. Time ceased to be a river and became a frozen lake. The dust from a crumbling piece of rebar hung suspended in the air. The tear on a child's cheek was a motionless, glistening track. The terrified, open mouth of a civilian was a silent statue. The golden energy that filled him was not hot like Ophe. It was a hum, a vibration that resonated with every cell in his body. A voice, not of words but of pure concept, whispered in his mind, "Run." He didn't question it. He didn't even think. He just moved. There was no strain. No recoil. No threat of shattered bones. The golden energy, this speed force, formed a protective aura around him, a second skin of pure kinetic power. One for all surged through him at 100%, not as a destructive force, but as a fuel source, a massive battery powering this new, impossible engine. The synergy was perfect, instantaneous. His first thought, the children. He was there. Not in a blur, not in a streak. He simply ceased to be in one place and began to be in another. He ran up the side of the falling building, his feet finding purchase on the sheer glass surface as if it were flat ground. The world was a gallery of frozen moments. He could see the intricate stress fractures in the metal frame of the building, the individual threads in the shirt of the terrified teacher. He entered the room, a ghost of green and gold. The children were still, their faces masks of terror. Gently, moving with a grace he had never possessed, he picked them up, one by one. The speed force aura extended to them, protecting them from the impossible forces at play. In what felt to him like a leisurely stroll, he carried them all down the side of the building and placed them far from the danger, their minds and bodies unable to perceive the movement. His second thought, the building. He looked at the failing support structure. He could see the exact points of catastrophic failure. He didn't punch it. He ran. He ran in a tight circle at the base of the tower, so fast that he became a solid ring of light. He was weaving a construct out of the speed force's energy, pulling it from the very air, from the dimension that now bled into his own. A glowing, golden-green lattice of pure force materialized around the supports, reinforcing them, arresting the building's fall completely. His third thought, the vortex. He turned his attention to the swirling maw of spatial distortion. He could see it now for what it was, an unstable wound in reality. He didn't need to punch it. He needed to close it. He ran around its circumference, but in the opposite direction of its spin. He moved faster and faster, a particle accelerator of one, generating an opposing gravitational and kinetic frequency. The vortex wavered, fought against him for a frozen eternity, and then collapsed with a silent implosion, leaving behind a faint scent of cinnamon and burned sugar. His final thought, Kajiro. He appeared before the villain. Kajiro was still standing with his arms outstretched, his face a mask of arrogant triumph, frozen in the moment before his victory. Deku could see the flow of Kajiro's quirk, the way he pulled at the seams of space. With pinpoint precision, Deku touched Kajiro's hands and feet. The speed force flowed from his fingertips, not as an attack, but as a binding agent, creating solid light manacles that anchored the villain to the unwarped ground beneath him. The entire sequence, from the moment the lightning hit him to the moment Kajiro was neutralized, took less than the time it takes for a human heart to beat once. To Deku, it felt like an hour of intense, focused work. And then, as the last of his tasks was complete, time snapped back into place like a rubber band. The sound, the light, the sensory input of the entire world hit him at once. 1,000 screams, a dozen explosions, the grinding of the stabilized tower, the terrified gasps of his friends, the hum of the energy still thrumming in his veins. It was a tidal wave of stimulus that crashed over his mind. His brain, which had just been processing the world at a speed that defied physics, couldn't handle the sudden, violent return to normal temporality. It was like going from a silent, empty room to the front row of a rock concert in a nanosecond. The world spun into a nauseating kaleidoscope of color and noise. The hum in his body became an uncontrollable, full-body vibration. He saw faint, crackling trails of golden lightning dance around his own hands. Phantom images burned onto his retinas. He didn't collapse from broken bones. He collapsed from a complete and total sensory overload, his consciousness mercifully shutting down to protect itself from a universe that was suddenly too loud, too bright, and too slow. Deku! Uraraka's cry was shrill with panic. She was the first to reach him, her zero-gravity quirk propelling her across the plaza. She fell to her knees beside his still form, her hands hovering over him, afraid to touch. Deku! Izuku, can you hear me? Ida and Todoroki arrived a moment later, their faces a mixture of awe and profound confusion. What was that? Ida asked, his voice losing its usual commanding tone, replaced by sheer bewilderment. He looked from the perfectly safe children, to the miraculously stable tower, to the neutralized villain, and back to his fallen friend. His speed, it's not possible. No quirk can do that. Todoroki knelt, his expression grim. He cautiously reached out and placed a hand on Deku's shoulder. He flinched back immediately. He's vibrating, Todoroki said, looking at his hand as if he touched a live power line. His entire body. There's an incredible amount of energy coming off him. It's not just one for all. Uraraka, steeling herself, placed her hand on Deku's forehead. It was warm, but the vibration was the most alarming part. It was a deep, powerful thrumming, like a colossal engine idling just beneath his skin. He's alive. His breathing is steady. Far across the city, on a rooftop where he had just finished helping evacuate a different sector, Toshinori Yagi, in his skeletal form, had seen it. He had seen the flash of green and gold light that had momentarily outshone the sun. He felt it not in his eyes, but in the embers of one for all that still resided within him. It was a tremor, a seismic event on a spiritual level. It was the feeling of a lit candle suddenly becoming a star. He arrived as medics were carefully loading Deku onto a specialized stretcher, one designed for electrical quirk users. He pushed through the crowd, his heart pounding with a mixture of pride and a deep, primal fear. What happened? He asked, his voice a ragged whisper as he looked at his student. We don't know, All Might, Ida reported, standing stiffly, trying to impose order on a situation that defied logic. The villain, Kajiro, created an impossible situation. Midoriya, he did something. He moved faster than I have ever seen. Faster than is physically conceivable. He saved everyone in an instant, and then collapsed. Toshinori leaned closer to the boy. He could feel it now, the energy Todoroki had mentioned. It was a clean, potent, humming power that coexisted with the familiar fire of One for All. They were intertwined, merged, creating something terrifying and new. He saw the faint trails of golden lightning that seemed to ghost around Midoriya's limp hands, like an afterimage of a miracle. On another battlefield several blocks away, Katsuki Bakugo blasted the last of the Null Collective grunts into a wall. He stood panting, the smell of nitroglycerin sharp in the air. Is that all of them? He growled at Kirishima, who was helping a paramedic. I think so, man. That was intense. Bakugo hadn't seen what had happened at the Central Plaza, not clearly. But he had seen the light. A flash of green and gold that had pierced the sky. And he had felt it. A strange pressure in the air, a ripple, like a stone dropped into the silent pond of reality. He didn't know what it was, but an instinct he couldn't name, the gut feeling of a rival who has been measuring himself against one person his entire life, told him everything. Deku. A scowl twisted his features. It wasn't just a new move. It wasn't a new trick. That feeling in the air, it was a fundamental shift. It was the sound of the goalposts not just being moved, but being launched into another galaxy. As the ambulance carrying Deku pulled away, its sirens a mournful wail, Toshinori Yagi looked at the impossible scene. The saved children, the standing tower, the captured villain. His boy had done it. He had saved everyone. He had achieved the impossible. But as he looked at the lingering, ethereal glow in the air where his successor had stood, a single, terrifying question echoed in the hero's heart. My boy, what have you become? Consciousness returned not as a gentle dawn, but as a fractured, kaleidoscopic nightmare. Izuku Midoriya was adrift in a sea of static, his own mind a storm-tossed vessel. There was no up or down, no beginning or end, only the sensation of being everywhere and nowhere at once. He was aware of a room, a bed, a beeping sound, but he perceived them not as a cohesive whole, but as an avalanche of disconnected data points. He could see the slow, lazy drift of a dust mote through a sunbeam, tracing its path with a godlike clarity that felt agonizingly eternal. He could hear the low hum of the fluorescent lights, not as a single tone, but as the individual oscillations of alternating current, a 60 Hz buzz that vibrated in the marrow of his bones. The rhythmic beep of the heart monitor beside him was not a comfort. It was a torturous, slow-motion drumbeat, each pulse taking an ice age to complete. He tried to open his eyes, only to realize they were already open. The world was simply moving too slowly for him to register change. He was a spectator watching a film projected 1 frame per hour. He was trapped in the amber of a single moment. A figure entered his peripheral vision. Recovery Girl. He recognized the familiar shape of her head, the syringe-like cane. She moved with the speed of a tectonic plate. Her mouth opened, and sound emerged, a low, guttural drone that stretched syllables into meaningless, cosmic hums. Izuku, he tried to answer. He formed the words in his mind, a simple, desperate plea, what's happening to me? The thought, however, was not a singular life raft in the storm. It was one of a million. His brain, supercharged by the alien energy that now saturated his nervous system, was a runaway engine. While one part of him was trying to speak, another was cataloging every micro-expression on Recovery Girl's face. Another was calculating the tensile strength of the bedsheets. And yet another was reliving the sensation of running up the Atheon Tower, the impossible solidity of glass under his feet. He was thinking about his mother's katsudon, the chemical composition of his costume's fabric, and the philosophical implications of a quirk that could warp space-time, all at the same instant. The torrent of thoughts was overwhelming, a cacophony of internal voices screaming for attention. He felt his own identity, the core of who Izuku Midoriya was, starting to fray, threatening to dissolve into the sheer, raw processing power of the entity he had become. He needed an anchor. An action. A simple, physical task to ground himself in reality. Water. The thought was a beacon of clarity. On the nightstand beside his bed was a glass of water. He could see the condensation on its side, each droplet a perfect, crystalline sphere. He would reach for it. He would drink. He would prove he was still in control. He focused all his splintered will on his right arm. Move. The arm obeyed, but not in the way he intended. There was no sensation of muscle contracting or sinew pulling. It was as if he issued a command to a machine that was no longer his. The arm lifted, but it jittered with a high-frequency vibration, a visible thrumming that blurred its edges. The golden-green lightning he remembered from the plaza now danced faintly around his fingertips, like St. Elmo's fire. He reached for the glass. His vibrating fingers made contact, and passed straight through it. A gasp of pure, existential horror lodged in his throat. For a terrifying second, his hand was merged with the glass. He felt no wetness, no cold, only a strange, tingling numbness, a void where sensation should be. He saw the water inside the glass ripple without being touched. He pulled back instinctively, and his hand phased through the wooden nightstand, the dense grain of the oak offering no more resistance than smoke. The coldness he felt then was not physical. It was a soul-deep chill, the feeling of reality itself telling him he no longer belonged. The world was no longer solid. He was no longer solid. He tried to scream, a raw, primal sound of terror. He pushed the air from his lungs, shaped his mouth, and let it out. To him, it was a single, desperate cry. Help! To Recovery Girl, it was an explosive burst of sound, a high-pitched, compressed chatter of syllables that lasted less than a tenth of a second, like a tape on fast-forward. It was utterly incomprehensible, a blast of pure vocal static. She jumped back, her eyes wide with alarm. Good heavens, child! Calm down! Her words, to him, were another slow, meaningless drone. The chasm between his perception and hers was absolute. He was a ghost in the machine of his own body, and the machine was running haywire. The horror wasn't just that he was out of control, it was that he was utterly, terrifyingly alone in his prison of accelerated time. In the observation room adjacent to the infirmary's quarantine ward, 3 figures watched the scene unfold on a series of high-resolution monitors. The mood was grim, the air thick with an anxiety that transcended mere concern. Nizu, the principal of UA High, sat with his paws steepled, his intelligent black eyes fixed on a screen displaying Midoriya's biosignatures. The graphs were a chaotic mess of spikes and frequencies that had no precedent in medical science. "It's not a biological rejection of one for all," Nizu stated, his voice a calm island in a sea of uncertainty. "Nor is it quark exhaustion. His cellular structure is stable, even robust. Overly so. Every cell in his body is vibrating at a frequency I can't even properly measure. It's as if he's been saturated with a type of kinetic energy that has bonded with his DNA." Toshinori Yagi, gaunt and frail in his true form, stood hunched over Nizu's shoulder, his skeletal hands clutching his own chest as if he could physically feel his successor's distress. The embers of one for all within him, faint as they were, resonated with the storm raging inside Midoriya. It felt like listening to a familiar song being played through a powerful, alien amplifier, the melody twisted and distorted into something both magnificent and terrifying. "It's the other thing," Toshinori rasped, his voice barely a whisper. "The power that came through that villain's portal. It didn't just give him a boost, Nizu. It merged with him. It merged with one for all." He shook his head, a look of profound guilt on his face. The quirk was already a tremendous burden. A stockpile of power that strained his body to its limits. "What have I done? I've given him a lit fuse, and a cosmic force just turned it into a bomb." Recovery girl, Chio Shizenji, entered the room, her expression a rare mask of utter frustration. She slammed her cane on the floor with a sharp clack. "Useless!" she snapped, her usual grandmotherly demeanor replaced with clinical anger. "My quirk is useless. I tried to heal him, to soothe his system, and it's like trying to patch a leaking dam with a band-aid. The energy he's emitting actively repels my kiss. It doesn't recognize it as a healing agent. It's not an injury, it's a complete system rewrite. He's running on a different operating system now," she sighed, slumping into a chair. "And he's terrified. I can see it in his eyes, even if I can't understand a word he's saying. He spoke just now. It sounded like a modem screeching. The poor boy is trapped in his own head, moving too fast for the world to keep up." Nizu nodded slowly. "A ghost in the machine. His consciousness, his spirit, is still Izuku Midoriya. But the machine, his body, is now governed by a new, unknown set of physical laws." He turned to Toshinori. "For his safety, and for ours, we have no choice. He must be kept in complete isolation in the gamma-level containment cell. It's designed to handle reality warping and high-energy emission quirks. We need to study this, to understand what we're dealing with before it becomes unstable." Toshinori's heart clenched. A containment cell. Like a villain. For a boy who had just performed the most heroic act he had ever witnessed. But he's just a child, Nizu. He needs comfort, not a cage. A child who is currently vibrating at a frequency that could potentially phase him through the floor and into the Earth's mantle if he loses control. Nizu countered, his tone gentle but firm. "This is not a punishment, Toshinori. It is a necessary precaution. We are in uncharted territory. And in uncharted territory, the first rule is to secure your vessel before you try to map the sea." The move to the gamma-level cell was a surreal ordeal. Deku perceived it as a series of frozen tableaus. The concerned faces of the transport team, the bright, sterile lights of the hallway, the heavy, metallic clang of the containment door shutting. The cell itself was a stark white cube, 20 meters on each side, made of a dense, quasi-crystalline alloy designed to inhibit quirk emissions. There were no sharp corners, no furniture, only a slight depression in the floor that served as a bed. Here, the isolation was absolute. The silence was a roaring pressure in his ears. His accelerated mind, starved of new stimulus, turned inward. He relived the battle with Kajiro 1,000,000 times, analyzing every microsecond. He saw the golden lightning not as a flash, but as a living, thinking river of energy pouring into him. He felt the hum inside him, the vibration that was both the source of his power and his prison. He tried to control it. He tried to find the off switch. He focused on the memory of All Might's smile, the feeling of his mother's hug, the determined look in Uraraka's eyes. He searched for his emotional anchor, the way he had always done to tame one for all. But this new power didn't respond to will in the same way. It was a fundamental part of him now, like his own heartbeat. Telling it to stop was like telling his own blood to cease flowing. Days blurred into a single, continuous moment. His friends tried to visit. He could see them through the thick, transparent wall of the cell. Uraraka, her face etched with worry, her hand pressed against the cold surface. Ida, standing ramrod straight, speaking slowly and deliberately as if trying to punch through the temporal barrier with sheer force of will. Todoroki, just watching, his heterochromatic eyes filled with a quiet, intense analysis, trying to understand the phenomenon before him. They were ghosts. Muted, slow-motion specters from a world he could no longer touch. He tried to wave, and his hand blurred into an incomprehensible shape. He tried to smile, and it must have looked like a grotesque, high-speed grimace. The chasm was too wide. After a while, they stopped coming as often. It was too painful for them, and for him. The only constant was All Might, who would sit outside the cell for hours, just being there, a silent, skeletal vigil. Deku couldn't hear his words of encouragement, but he could see the intent in his mentor's sad blue eyes. It was the only thing that kept him from completely unraveling. One day, the sterile peace of the facility was shattered. DKU! The sound was so loud, so explosive, it momentarily punched through Deku's distorted perception. It was a roar of pure, unfiltered rage. Get out here, you damn nerd! What did you do? What new trick did you pull this time? Katsuki Bakugo. Deku turned his head, the motion so fast it would have been invisible to a normal observer. He saw Bakugo through the containment wall, being physically restrained by Mr. Aizawa, whose capture weapon was wrapped tight around his torso. Bakugo was straining against the bonds, his face contorted in a mask of fury, his palms sparking with miniature explosions. Let me go, Aizawa-sensei! Bakugo snarled. I need to see him. I need to know. Calm yourself, Bakugo. Aizawa's voice was a low, tired drawl, but it held an iron authority. Midoriya is not in a condition to receive visitors. Especially not you. I don't care. He cheated. Bakugo roared, the words raw with a frantic energy that went beyond simple anger. It was the sound of a worldview crumbling. There are rules. There's a ladder. You climb it. You get stronger. You work harder, you win. He didn't just climb the damn ladder, he set it on fire and took a rocket ship. It's not fair. Deku watched, a profound sadness piercing through his frantic, accelerated state. He understood. For Bakugo, their rivalry was a cornerstone of his existence. It was the metric by which he measured his own growth. Deku had not just surpassed him, he had invalidated the measurement entirely. He was playing a different game now, a game Bakugo didn't know the rules to. Aizawa finally managed to drag the struggling Bakugo away, his shouts echoing down the corridor before fading. The silence that returned was heavier than before. Deku looked down at his own hands. The faint golden lightning still danced around them. He was a ghost. A monster. A cheater. He had saved everyone, but he had lost himself. He curled into a ball on the cold floor, the uncontrollable vibration of his body a constant, tormenting reminder of the power that was slowly erasing him. Thousands of miles away, in a reality he didn't recognize, Barry Allen stumbled out of a swirling vortex of crimson and gold lightning and fell to his knees. The air was wrong. The scent of unknown blossoms mixed with the tang of salt water. The architecture of the city sprawling before him was a bizarre fusion of hypermodern and traditional that his mind struggled to parse. The dimensional fissure created by the villain Kajiro hadn't just been a one-way street. When the speed force flooded into the MHA dimension, the backlash had created a chaotic, unstable wormhole that had snagged Barry and pulled him through. He pushed himself up, his scarlet suit, a marvel of advanced polymers and speed force tech, feeling strangely heavy. Wally? Iris? He called out, his voice hoarse. Only the sound of the wind answered. Cisco, can you read me? Static. His connection to SDR Labs, to his world, was severed. He was alone. stranded. But he was not without a compass. As a veteran speedster, a paragon of the Speed Force, his connection to it was as fundamental as his own heartbeat. And right now, the Speed Force was screaming. He closed his eyes and focused, shutting out the alien sights and sounds. He reached inward, to the kinetic energy that defined him. He felt the familiar, comforting hum of his own connection, but it was accompanied by a new, dissonant chord. It was a signal, a beacon of unimaginable power. It felt like a newborn star screaming in a silent nursery. It was raw, pure, and unbelievably potent, far more than any new speedster he had ever encountered. But it was also chaotic, untamed, and dangerously unstable. It was a fountain of raw Speed Force energy, gushing into this reality without a conduit, without control. It was a potential extinction-level event, an energy source that could tear this planet apart from the inside out if it wasn't properly contained and disciplined. Worry gnawed at him, overriding his own predicament. A speedster with that much raw power and no training? It was a catastrophe waiting to happen. They could accidentally run into the Speed Force itself, erasing themselves from time. They could unravel their own molecular structure. They could generate temporal paradoxes that could collapse reality. He had to find the source. He had to help. It was his duty as the Flash. A single, brilliant thread of golden light materialized in his vision, a line only he could see. It stretched from the horizon, a shimmering, divine pathway leading him toward the epicenter of the disturbance. His Speed Force GPS. Okay, Barry, he murmured to himself, stretching his legs. Job first. Figure out where here is later. He took a running stance. Lightning, the color of molten gold, crackled around him. And then he was gone. He moved as a scarlet blur, a whisper of wind and a flicker of red light. The alien city became a stream of colors. He ran across the ocean, his feet kicking up spray that hung in the air for minutes after he passed. He crossed continents in the time it took a normal person to blink. The golden thread was his guide, pulling him relentlessly forward. The energy signature grew stronger, more concentrated, more panicked. He could feel the nascent speedster's terror, their confusion, their isolation. It was a feeling he remembered from his own early days, magnified 1,000-fold. The thread led him to a nation shaped like a crescent moon, and then to a sprawling, futuristic city. Muzidafu. Finally, it guided him to a massive, H-shaped complex, a fortress of learning and power that radiated an energy all its own. The golden thread didn't stop at the gate. It passed right through the walls, leading deep into the heart of the facility. He came to a stop on a vast, manicured lawn, a training ground dotted with mock cityscapes and obstacle courses. The scent of ozone, his own and the target's, was thick in the air. The beacon was here. Close. And it was in agony. He didn't bother with the front door. He wasn't here for a social call. He vibrating his molecules, matching the frequency of the building's outer wall. For a split second, he became an intangible specter of red and gold. He passed through the concrete and steel as if it were air, his senses guiding him through corridors, past classrooms filled with startled-looking teenagers, and down into the bowels of the building. The energy was almost overwhelming here. It was a raw, physical pressure, a constant hum that made the fillings in his teeth ache. The golden thread ended at a heavy, circular door, a vault worthy of a national treasury. He didn't hesitate. He phased through it. He appeared in a flash of scarlet and gold lightning in the center of a stark white, sterile cube. The first thing he saw was the boy. He was young, a teenager, with a wild mop of green-black hair. He was curled on the floor, his body trembling with a violent, uncontrollable vibration, and a faint, desperate green-gold light flickered around him. Barry Allen, the Flash, looked at the terrified, trapped boy at the heart of the cosmic storm. He saw the immense power, the crushing fear, and the unyielding spark of a hero's heart beneath it all. He immediately recognized the symptoms, the horror of a new speedster drowning in their own abilities. He let the lightning around him die down, his presence becoming calm and steady. His voice was soft, but carried the weight of experience and empathy. "It's okay," Barry said, taking a slow step forward. "I'm here to help." Then, for the benefit of the shocked faces he could see through the observation window, he added, his voice resonating with a power that promised answers to an impossible situation. "I found you. The appearance of the man in the scarlet suit was an event that defied all known principles of security and physics. One moment, the gamma-level containment cell held only the vibrating, isolated form of Izuku Midoriya. The next, a flash of lightning, brighter and a different shade than Izuku's own, painted the sterile white walls in hues of crimson and gold. A man stood there, radiating an aura of calm authority that was in stark contrast to the chaotic energy storm he had just walked into. In the observation room, the reaction was pandemonium. Intruder alert! Gamma-level cell has been breached! A security officer shouted into his comms, his voice cracking with panic. Alarms blared, red lights flashing across the faces of Nizu and Tashinori. Impossible! Nizu breathed, his paws pressed flat against the reinforced glass. The walls are a quasi-crystalline alloy bonded on a molecular level. Nothing can phase through them. Nothing. Tashinori Yagi was frozen, his mind struggling to process the scene. This man, he was clad in a hero's costume, sleek and alien. The lightning bolt emblem on his chest was a bold declaration, but it was the energy signature that staggered Tashinori. It was the same fundamental power that now coursed through his successor, but where Midoriya's was a chaotic, untamed wildfire, this man's was a controlled, precision furnace. He was the source from which the river flowed. Inside the cell, Izuku's hyper-accelerated perception registered the man's arrival not as a sudden event, but as a controlled deceleration. He saw the intruder's form resolve from a being of pure energy into a solid man. For the first time since waking up, he was seeing something move at a speed that was almost comprehensible to his new state. The man's voice, when it came, was the first sound to pierce the temporal veil that had imprisoned him. It didn't drone or stretch. It was clear, crisp, and resonated with the very energy that was tearing him apart. It's okay. I'm here to help. Izuku flinched, curling tighter into a ball. Help? How could anyone help? He was a phantom, a glitch in reality. He tried to speak, to warn the man away, but the attempt only resulted in a burst of high-frequency chatter. His body vibrated harder, his control slipping even further in his agitation. The floor beneath him began to hum ominously. Barry Allen took in the scene with a practiced eye. The boy's fear was palpable, a frantic energy that was making his condition worse. He was a feedback loop of terror and power. Barry knew he couldn't just talk to him. He had to connect with him on a level the boy could understand. He had to speak the language of the speed force. Closing his eyes for a second, Barry reached out with his own connection. He didn't try to suppress the boy's chaotic energy. Instead, he created a bubble of calm, a pocket of stable, disciplined speed force energy that enveloped them both. He projected feelings of safety, empathy, and understanding. I know this feeling. I know this fear. You are not alone. For Izuku, the effect was instantaneous and profound. The roaring, chaotic ocean of energy inside him suddenly found a shore. The storm was not gone, but it was contained, buffered by a powerful, calming presence. The frantic, million-mile-an-hour thoughts in his head didn't stop, but they organized, falling into ordered streams instead of a crashing waterfall. The world, which had been moving at a glacial pace, began to speed up, just slightly. He could perceive the man before him not as a statue, but as a living, breathing person. Breathe, Barry said, his voice slow and deliberate, matching Izuku's new, slightly improved perception of time. Just focus on your breath. In and out. Match me. Barry took an exaggeratedly slow breath, and Izuku, desperate for any anchor, found himself mimicking the action. Inhale. The torrent of energy inside him stabilized a fraction more. Exhale. The violent vibrations racking his body lessened, diminishing from a bone-jarring quake to a high-frequency hum. Good. Very good, Barry said, giving him a reassuring smile. He took another slow step closer. My name is Barry Allen. I'm like you. I'm a speedster. This power, it's called the Speed Force. It chose you. Izuku stared, his wide green eyes filled with a dawning, fragile hope. Speed Force. The name itself felt right, like a key clicking into a lock he didn't know existed. He wasn't broken. His quirk hadn't mutated into some horrifying disease. He was something new. It's overwhelming, I know. Barry continued, his tone gentle, like a bomb disposal expert talking down a live wire. Your thoughts are moving 1,000,000 miles a minute. Your body feels like it's going to fly apart. You feel disconnected, out of sync with everything. That's because you are. The first lesson every new speedster has to learn is the most important one. You need an anchor. Izuku's brow furrowed. Anchor? The speed force is a cosmic ocean, kid. Without an anchor you'll be swept away. It needs a center, something to ground you in reality. It can be a person, a memory, an ideal. It's your lightning rod. It's what you run towards, not what you run from. When you feel yourself losing control, vibrating apart, you focus on that anchor with every fiber of your being. It pulls you back. It reminds you who you are. Barry's own expression softened for a moment, a flicker of deep emotion in his eyes. For me, it's my wife, Iris. She's my lightning rod. No matter how fast or how far I run, she's my home. So tell me, kid, who or what is yours? The question cut through Izuku's remaining confusion. An anchor. His lightning rod. His mind, now more focused than it had been in days, sifted through the maelstrom of his thoughts, and found it instantly. It was an image, burned into his soul from the first day he had ever dared to dream. The towering figure of All Might, his two signature antenna-like tufts of hair silhouetted against the sun, the sound of his booming laughter. The impossible, unwavering smile that promised safety and hope to a world drowning in fear. And it was more than just the image. It was the ideal behind it. I am here! The declaration that one person could stand against the darkness and be a beacon. It was the feeling he got when he saved someone, the look of relief in their eyes. It was his mother's tearful pride. It was Uraraka's fierce belief in him. It was the reason he had been willing to shatter his own body in that plaza. The burning, all-consuming desire to be a hero who could save everyone with a smile. He focused on it. He poured all his runaway energy, all his fear, all his hope, into that singular concept. To be a symbol of peace. To save everyone. The effect was dramatic. The last of the violent vibrations ceased. The golden-green lightning that had been flickering erratically around him retracted, pulling back into his skin until it was gone. The world, which had been a slow-motion film, suddenly snapped into perfect, real-time focus with a dizzying lurch. He heard the alarms blaring outside the cell. He heard the muffled, panicked shouts of the security guards. He saw Barry Allen standing before him, a normal man in a strange costume, a reassuring smile on his face. He felt the solid floor beneath him, the cool air on his skin. He was back. I can hear you, Izuku whispered, his voice raspy from disuse. He looked at his hands, solid and still for the first time in what felt like a lifetime. I'm me again. A wave of relief so profound it was dizzying washed over him, and tears welled in his eyes. There you are, Barry said, his smile widening. Welcome back. Stand down. I repeat, stand down. Niza's voice, amplified by the facility's PA system, cut through the alarm. He is not hostile. The heavy vault door to the Gamma cell hissed open. Nizu, All Might, and a squad of heavily armed security guards stood in the doorway, their weapons trained on the scarlet-clad stranger. Barry raised his hands in a placating gesture, careful not to make any sudden moves. Easy, folks. I'm one of the good guys, I promise. My name is Barry Allen. In my world, they call me the Flash. Tashinori stepped forward, his eyes wide, his skeletal frame trembling slightly. Your world? Long story, Barry said with a wry sigh. Involves a villain with a reality-warping quirk, a dimensional fissure, and me getting pulled a very, very long way from home. He gestured to the now stable Izuku, who was slowly pushing himself to his feet. But more importantly, that fissure pulled something else through with it. The speed force. And it found him. Niza's sharp eyes darted between Barry and Izuku. You're saying this speed force is the source of young Midoriya's new abilities? It's not a quirk? It's more than a quirk, Barry explained, beginning to walk them through the impossible physics. It's a fundamental force, like gravity or electromagnetism. It governs all motion in my universe. It's a sentient, cosmic energy, and for reasons I'm still trying to figure out, It chose him as its new host in this reality. He looked at Izuku, a hint of awe in his voice. And I've never seen anything like it. The amount of raw, pure speed force energy this kid is putting out is off the charts. It's like he has an infinite battery pack hooked up to him. Tashinori's breath hitched. One for all, Barry's head snapped towards him. One for what now? And so, the explanation became a two-way street. In the sterile debriefing room, surrounded by UA's top minds, the two worlds collided. Tashinori, with Nisa's help, explained the sacred, century-long legacy of One for All, a stockpiling quirk, passed from user to user, accumulating power and will with each generation. A torch passed down to fight the ultimate evil, all for one. Barry listened intently, his super-speed mind processing the information with incredible efficiency. The puzzle pieces clicked into place. That's it, he said, slamming a hand on the table, making everyone jump. That's why he's so powerful. The speed force needs energy to manifest, to be used. Most speedsters generate their own connection, like a small generator. But One for All, it's not a generator, it's a celestial battery. The stockpiled power of 9 generations is acting as a massive, unparalleled fuel source for the speed force. The two powers aren't just coexisting, they've formed a symbiotic bond. It's created something entirely new. Something that might be more powerful than anything I've ever seen. Izuku, sitting beside Tashinori, listened in stunned silence. He felt like a character in a comic book. A different universe? A sentient speed force? It was all too much, but the feeling of control, the solidness of the chair beneath him, was undeniably real. But what does that mean for him? Tashinori asked, his voice laced with parental fear. Is he in danger? This power, it almost destroyed his body before. Now it's the only thing keeping him from destroying himself, Barry stated grimly. He turned to Izuku. Kid, that vibration you were feeling? That's the speed force protecting you. It creates an aura, a frictionless shield around you. When you were tapping into One for All at 100%, it was that aura that kept your bones from turning to dust. The speed force is protecting its host. The problem is, you don't know how to turn it off. Or, more accurately, how to control the flow. He leaned forward, his expression deadly serious. And that's the real danger. The speed force is a dimension in and of itself. A paradise of infinite motion. If you run too fast, if you lose control without your anchor, you could run right into it. You wouldn't just die. You'd be erased from existence, absorbed into the energy, your consciousness scattered across all of time. A heavy silence fell over the room. The implications were staggering. Izuku had been gifted with a power that could shatter the laws of physics, but a single misstep could wipe him from the timeline. Nisa was the first to break the silence, his small face a mask of calculated thought. Mr. Allen, you are, by your own admission, stranded in our world, and you are, evidently, the sole expert on this. Speed force. Young Midoriya is our student, and his well-being is our highest priority. It seems our interests are aligned. He looked Barry in the eye. We need your help. We need a teacher. In exchange, UA, I will devote its full resources, our support department, our scientific minds, our intelligence network, to finding a way to stabilize the dimensional fissure and get you home. Barry looked at Izuku, at the mixture of fear and determination in the boy's eyes. He saw a kindred spirit. A hero in the making, burdened with a power he didn't ask for but was destined to wield. There was no real choice to be made. He extended a hand across the table to Nizu. You've got a deal, Principal. Then he turned to his new, reluctant student. All right, kid. Lesson 1 starts now. Your anchor taught you how to stop. Now you need to learn how to start. We're going to teach you how to consciously turn the speed on and off. They moved to Training Ground Beta, a massive, empty expanse of flat, reinforced concrete. Barry stood opposite Izuku, a good 50 meters away. The UA staff watched from a safe distance in a mobile observation unit. Okay, Deku, Barry began, using the hero name he'd overheard the others use. It's not a switch. It's a connection. You don't activate the speed force. You let it flow through you. Before, it was a broken dam. Now you need to be the gatekeeper. You decide how much gets through. Izuku nodded, his expression tense with concentration. How? Don't think about running. Don't think about speed, Barry instructed. Think about the feeling. The hum. The vibration. The lightning. It's there, just under your skin, waiting. Find it. Izuku closed his eyes. He took a deep breath, quieting his frantic mind. He reached inward, past the familiar, fiery warmth of One for All. He searched for the other thing, the cool, humming energy of the speed force. He found it, a sleeping giant coiled around his spirit. I feel it, he said, his eyes still closed. Good. Now gently, invite it out. Don't force it. Just let it happen. Focus on your feet. Tell the energy to go there. Picture the lightning. Izuku focused. He imagined the golden-green energy flowing down his legs, pooling in his iron-soled boots. For a moment, nothing happened. He felt a flicker of frustration. Don't get frustrated. Barry's voice cut in, as if reading his mind. Frustration, anger, fear, they make the connection chaotic. You need to be calm. Intent. Remember your anchor. You're not doing this to be fast. You're doing this to save people. Izuku's mind flashed to the image of the children in the window. The falling tower. The feeling of absolute certainty that he would give anything to save them. A wave of calm, heroic purpose washed over him, and then it happened. A single, brilliant green-gold spark crackled at the toe of his boot. It was followed by another, and another, until a quiet, steady stream of lightning began to wreath his feet. He could feel the hum, the power, not as a raging storm, but as a controlled current. He opened his eyes, a gasp of astonishment escaping his lips as he looked down at his glowing feet. Yes! Barry grinned, his excitement genuine. You're doing it! You're controlling the flow. I can feel it, Izuku said, his voice filled with wonder. It's listening. It's part of you now. It will always listen, Barry said. Now for the hard part. Let it spread. Full body. But keep it controlled. Like you do with, what did you call it? Full cowling. Izuku took another breath, drawing on his years of painstaking practice with One for All. He knew this process. The careful, deliberate spreading of power throughout his entire body. He applied the same principle, guiding the speed force from his feet, up his legs, through his torso, and down his arms. The green-gold lightning spread, tracing the lines of his costume. It wasn't the chaotic, explosive aura from before. It was a thin, shimmering sheath of energy, humming with contained power. He felt the world slow down again, but this time it wasn't a prison. It was a choice. He was in the driver's seat. No. Barry's voice was a low, steady presence in his slowed perception. Run to me. Don't think about breaking records. Just a simple run. Izuku bent his knees, his body coiled like a spring. He pushed off. The world dissolved into a blur of motion. There was no sound of his footsteps, no feeling of wind resistance. There was only the sensation of effortless, perfect movement. He crossed the 50 meters in what felt like a single, fluid step. He came to a stop directly in front of Barry, not with a stumble or a skid, but with a perfect, instantaneous cessation of movement. The lightning around him died down as he consciously pulled the energy back in. He stood there, panting slightly, not from exertion, but from sheer adrenaline. He had done it. Barry Allen was beaming, his face alight with pride. Heh! Not bad for a first try, kid. He clapped a hand on Izuku's shoulder. Not bad at all. You're a natural. From the observation unit, Toshinori watched, tears streaming freely down his gaunt cheeks. Niza simply steepled his paws, a small, knowing smile on his face. The symbol of peace was not broken. He was being reforged into something stronger, faster, and more brilliant than any of them could have ever imagined. The lesson had begun. In the deepest, most secure sublevel of Tartarus, the world was a symphony of muted suffering. The air was cold, sterile, and recycled, carrying the faint, metallic tang of despair. Here, light was a privilege, not a right. The only illumination in cell block Omega came from the dull, red emergency strips that lined the floor and the single, piercing beam of a turret-mounted scanner that swept ceaselessly across the face of the prison's most infamous resident. All for One did not perceive his incarceration as a defeat. Defeat was an end. This, to him, was merely a pause. An intermission in a grand opera of his own composition. He sat on the edge of his cot, a picture of forced placidity, his life support systems humming a quiet, monotonous tune. His face, a mass of scar tissue that had once been a canvas of mocking smiles, was hidden behind a respirator. But his mind, the true seat of his power and his evil, was as active and malevolent as ever. For years, his senses had been attuned to the world through the hundreds of quirks he held in his collection. He could feel the subtle shifts in barometric pressure, hear conversations 3 blocks away through a stolen sensory quirk, and taste the chemical composition of the air. It was through this intricate web of stolen senses that he first felt it. It was not a tremor in the earth or a shift in the political landscape. It was a tremor in reality itself. A sudden, sharp spike of cosmic energy had pierced the veil of his world. It was a flavor of power unlike any he had ever tasted, and he had tasted thousands. It wasn't a quirk. Quirks, even the most powerful ones, were like rivers, mighty, but flowing within the established landscape of their universe. This was an ocean. An ocean from somewhere else, crashing onto their shores. The initial wave had been disorienting, a blast of pure, unadulterated positive energy. It was creative, kinetic, and vibrant. It felt like hope, a sensation so alien and repulsive to him that it was physically nauseating. He had dismissed it at first as some anomalous energy burst from the battle in Yuzurifu, perhaps a side effect of that fool Kajiro's quirk going haywire. But then, the energy had focused. It had found a host. And the signature of that host was sickeningly familiar. It was intertwined with the crackling, burning power of One for All. With Izuku Midoriya, a low, guttural chuckle escaped All for One's respirator, a sound like gravel grinding in a rusty machine. Of course, the universe, in its infinite, cruel irony, had handed its newest, shiniest toy to the 9th user. To his nemesis's little puppet. His network, though severely crippled, was not entirely dismantled. Dr. Kyudaigaraki, his most loyal servant, still had access to deep-level sensors and intelligence feeds. The data began to trickle in, painting a picture that was both infuriating and fascinating. Reports of impossible speed. A falling tower stabilized by solidified light. A spatial vortex collapsing, all attributed to the boy. All for One spent days in silent contemplation, his vast intellect turning the problem over and over. He analyzed the energy signatures Garaki fed him, dissected their properties, their frequency, their resonance. This speed force, as the new, scarlet-clad interloper called it, was a power predicated on positive motion, on creation, on life. It was an engine that propelled reality forward. And in that analysis, a profound, philosophical truth revealed itself to him, a truth born from a lifetime of theft and domination. For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. For every creation, there is a corresponding destruction. For every light, there must be a shadow. For every positive, there must be a negative. If this speed force was a fundamental, positive force of the universe, then its antithesis must also exist. Or if it did not exist here, in this reality it could exist. It was a vacuum waiting to be filled. A new ambition, grander and more terrifying than simply stealing One for All, began to form in the darkness of his mind. Why steal a piece of the puzzle when you could create your own, superior version? Why command a river when you could become the personification of drought and decay? He would not just tap into the negative speed force. He would will it into being. He was the perfect vessel for such an undertaking. His very soul was a monument to entropy. His core motivation was not creation, but acquisition and control, the ultimate acts of negation. His hatred for all might, a burning, black star of malice nurtured for decades, was a power source more potent than any sun. His body held a library of stolen quirks, a chaotic chorus of stolen lives and energies that he could use as a catalyst. He began the process. It was not a physical act, but an internal one, a feat of sheer, indomitable will. He sat on his cot, perfectly still, while a war raged within him. He reached into the core of his being, to the nexus where all his stolen quirks resided. He found the ones based on hatred, on fear, on decay, on energy absorption. He began to twist them, to pervert them, to focus their output not outward, but inward, into a single, focused point of pure negativity. He used the stolen emotional amplification quirk to magnify his hatred for All Might until it was a tangible force, a psychic pressure that made the guards in the monitoring station feel a sudden, inexplicable dread. He used an energy conversion quirk to take that raw, hateful emotion and transmute it into a volatile, kinetic energy. He used the stolen quirk that manipulated cellular decay and turned it upon the very fabric of the energy he was creating, infusing it with an aura of rot. He was building an engine of pure spite. The first sign was a flicker. A single, bloody red spark that danced in the air before him for a fraction of a second before vanishing. The scanner turret paused its sweep, its sensors registering a momentary, unidentifiable energy spike, all for one's lips, hidden beneath his mask, twisted into a triumphant sneer. He had done it. He had created a spark. Now, he would fan it into a fire. He pushed harder. He poured more of his will, his hate, his very essence into the burgeoning negative energy. The process was agonizing. It felt like his soul was being flayed, like he was birthing a star made of antimatter in his own chest. But the pain was fuel. The suffering was a testament to his power. Red and black lightning began to crackle around him, thin, angry tendrils of it snapping in the sterile air of his cell. They were not like the clean, vibrant lightning of the Speed Force. These were jagged, sickly, and seemed to suck the light out of the room. The dull red emergency lights flickered and dimmed in their presence. The hum of his life support system grew erratic. The turret swiveled back to him, its light now bathing him in a constant, focused beam. Alarms began to sound in the central control room of Tartarus. Energy spike in cell block Omega. It's the primary asset. What kind of energy? Is it a quirk activation? Negative. I don't know what it is. It's like anti-energy. It's draining power from the local grid. The red-black lightning grew thicker, more violent. It writhed around him like living snakes, clinging to his form. It didn't just crackle, it hissed, a sound like decaying matter and static. The air grew cold, a deep, unnatural chill that had nothing to do with the prison's climate control. All for one felt the power coalesce, felt it bond with him. It was a cold, hungry, and parasitic power. It did not create kinetic energy. It stole it from its surroundings, creating a localized field of entropy. It did not move things forward. It made everything else move backward, slower, relative to him. It was the power of the predator, the black hole, the grave. He had done it. He had birthed the negative speed force into his world. And it was his, and his alone. He slowly, deliberately stood up. The red-black lightning swirled around him, a cloak of pure malevolence. He looked at the thick, reinforced wall of his cell, a marvel of engineering designed to hold a god. He smiled, a grotesque twisting of scarred tissue. This cage was built to contain a being who obeyed the laws of physics. He no longer did. Back at UA, the mood was one of cautious, electric optimism. Izuku Midoriya was a star pupil, a fact that surprised no one but pleased everyone. His discipline, his analytical mind, and his sheer heroic drive made him the perfect student for the impossible lessons Barry Allen was teaching him. The change in him was noticeable to all of Class 1A. He had returned to the dorms not broken or traumatized, but transformed. There was a new confidence about him, a quiet centeredness that hadn't been there before. The frantic, nervous energy had been replaced by a deep, humming potential that seemed to radiate from him even when he was standing still. Their first day back in a practical heroics class was a revelation. The exercise was a simple capture the flag variant, designed to test mobility and teamwork. Class 1A was pitted against 1B, and the flag was placed in the center of Training Ground Gamma. The starting whistle blew. Before anyone could even take a single step, there was a soft crack of displaced air and a flicker of green-gold light. Izuku was gone from the starting line. A split second later he was back, holding the enemy team's flag. He stood there, not even breathing hard, a small, slightly sheepish smile on his face. The entire exercise had lasted 0.8 seconds. Class 1A and 1B stood in stunned, absolute silence. Kendo Rappa from 1B just slowly lowered the hand she'd been raising to activate her quirk. Monoma, for the first time in his life, was speechless, his jaw hanging open, unable to even begin to formulate a taunt. The silence was finally broken by Katsuki Bakugo. DKU! It was a roar that was less anger and more a howl of sheer, frustrated disbelief. He lunged, his hands already sparking. What the hell was that? Bakugo launched himself forward with a controlled explosion, a move that would have been impossible for anyone else to dodge. But Izuku was no longer anyone else. The world slowed to a crawl for him. He saw the individual particles of smoke and soot in Bakugo's blast. He saw the tensing of his rival's muscles, the furious glint in his eyes. With an almost lazy grace, Izuku sidestepped. Bakugo flew past him, his momentum carrying him into a clumsy roll. It's the speed force, Kaken, Izuku said, his voice calm and even. The green-gold lightning flickered around him for a moment, a visual punctuation mark. Bakugo scrambled to his feet, his face a thunderous mask. He was shaking, not with rage, but with something deeper. It was the cognitive dissonance of seeing the person he had always defined as a pebble beneath his feet suddenly become a mountain. Speed force? He snarled, spitting the words like a curse. Don't give me that crap! It's a trick! Another secret quirk you had hidden away! He charged again, and again Izuku sidestepped with impossible ease. It wasn't a fight. It was a matador sidestepping a bull. It's not a trick, Izuku said, his voice laced with a sadness for his friend's turmoil. It's something new. And I'm still learning. Aizawa, watching from the sidelines with Barry, let out a long, tired sigh. This is going to be a problem, isn't it? Barry chuckled softly. Rivalries are tricky. Especially when one of them gets superpowers from another dimension. Give him time. The angry one will either adapt or break. The reaction from the rest of the class was a spectrum of awe and concern. Tenya Ida approached Izuku after the exercise, his movements stiff and formal. He pushed his glasses up his nose, his expression one of deep, philosophical turmoil. Midoriya, he began, his voice uncharacteristically quiet. I must confess, I am experiencing a profound crisis. My entire identity as a hero, my family's legacy, is built upon the concept of speed, of the engine that propels us. To witness what you can do, it forces me to reevaluate the very definition of my own power. Izuku placed a hand on his friend's shoulder. Ida, your speed is yours. You earned it. You trained for it. It's not about who's fastest. It's about how we use what we have to help people. Your discipline, your leadership, that's a power I'm still trying to catch up to. Ida looked at him, and a slow, genuine smile spread across his face. You are as wise as you are swift, my friend. Thank you. He then chopped the air with his hand, his usual vigor returning. However, this does mean I must redouble my training efforts by 500% to remain a worthy rival and class representative. Achiko Uraraka, on the other hand, was pure, undiluted support. She bounced on her heels, her eyes sparkling. Deku, that was amazing. You were like a comet. A super cool, green-gold hero comet. Are you okay though? Is it hard to control? Does it make you dizzy? Her rapid-fire questions were a comforting balm of normalcy. Izuku laughed, a real, genuine laugh. I'm okay, Uraraka. Barry is teaching me. It's a lot. But it's good. Her smile was as bright as the sun. I knew you could do it. You've always been able to do incredible things. This is just more incredible. Her simple, unwavering faith was a more powerful anchor than even she could know. It was a reminder of the people he was fighting for, the normalcy he was protecting. Later that evening, Bakugo cornered him outside the dorms. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the campus. Bakugo wasn't yelling anymore. His energy was coiled, tense, like a predator about to strike. Race me, he said, his voice a low growl. Izuku looked at him. Kaken, what's the point? You know how it will end. I don't care how it ends. Bakugo snapped, his control finally breaking. I need to see it. I need to feel it. I need to know exactly how far behind I am. Don't you dare patronize me, Deku. Don't you dare hold back. Race me? To the front gate. Izuku saw the desperation in his rival's eyes. It wasn't about winning. It was about calibration. Bakugo needed a new baseline. He needed to quantify the impossible gap between them so he could begin the arduous, infuriating process of trying to close it. To deny him this would be the ultimate insult, Izuku sighed. Okay, Kaken. To the front gate. They stood side by side. Bakugo took his stance, his body thrumming with power, ready to unleash a chain of his most powerful explosions for propulsion. Izuku just stood there, relaxed. On 3. Bakugo grunted. 1. 2. On 2. Izuku vanished. There was no sound, no flash of light this time. He just ceased to be there. Bakugo stood frozen for a second, the word 3 dying on his lips. Then, slowly, he turned. Izuku was standing by the front gate, leaning against the wall, patiently waiting. Bakugo didn't scream. He didn't rage. He just stood there, silhouetted against the setting sun, as the full, crushing weight of the new world order settled upon his shoulders. He looked down at his own hands, at the power he had always believed was the pinnacle of strength. For the first time, it felt small. He didn't walk back to the dorms. He turned and marched straight to the gym, a new, cold fire burning in his eyes. The rocket ship had left him behind. Fine. He would just have to build his own. Izuku watched him go, a pang of sadness in his chest. The chasm between them had never been wider. He could only hope that one day, they would be able to stand on the same side of it again. As he turned to go back inside, a faint, unfamiliar chill prickled the back of his neck. A coldness that felt negative. He shook his head, dismissing it as a stray breeze. He didn't know it yet, but across the country, in the darkest pit of villainy, his opposite had just been born. The race had a new contender. The days that followed were a blur of impossible science and grueling, exhilarating training. Barry Allen, thrust into the role of a reluctant professor at the world's most extraordinary high school, attacked his new teaching duties with the same focused intensity he applied to everything in his life. The classroom was no longer a traditional lecture hall, but the vast, state-of-the-art expanse of training ground Epsilon, nicknamed the Speed Lab, by a perpetually awestruck power loader. Izuku Midoriya, for his part, absorbed the lessons like a sponge. His entire life had been a study in power he couldn't have. Now, he was a student of a power that was seemingly limitless. His analytical mind, already a formidable tool, was now supercharged by the speed force. He didn't just learn the techniques Barry taught him. He dissected them, reverse-engineered their physics, and filled notebooks with frantic, brilliant scribbles that looked like a madman's attempt to chart the birth of a new universe. All right, Deku, pop quiz! Barry's voice crackled over the comm system. He was standing in the observation booth alongside Nizu and a frequently visiting Mei Hatsum, who looked at the energy readouts with the manic glee of a child on Christmas morning. What's the fundamental principle of phasing through solid matter? Izuku stood in the center of the lab, a massive, 10-foot-thick wall of reinforced concrete and steel rebar looming before him. He was humming with a low-level charge of the speed force, a faint green-gold aura shimmering around his form. It's about frequency and alignment, Izuku answered without hesitation, his voice calm and focused. Every object, every atom in the universe, vibrates at a specific natural frequency. Solid matter feels solid because the space between its atoms is infinitesimally small, and our own atoms are repelled by their electromagnetic fields. Phasing isn't about being intangible. It's about vibrating my own body's atoms so rapidly that they can pass through the empty space within the wall's atomic structure without interacting. Barry grinned. A+, kid. You've got the theory down cold. But theory doesn't get you to the other side of that wall. It's all about control. Vibrate too slow, you smack into it. Vibrate too fast, you could trigger a localized nuclear fission reaction and turn this whole training ground into a glass-bottomed crater. No pressure. Izuku took a deep breath, his anchor, the image of All Might's unwavering smile, firmly in his mind. He closed his eyes and focused on the hum of the speed force within him. He had learned to control its flow, but this was different. This wasn't about raw speed, it was about precision. He began to increase his internal vibration. The hum intensified, becoming a high-pitched whine that was audible even to those in the observation booth. His physical form began to blur at the edges, the green-gold aura around him shimmering violently. "Easy, kid!" Barry's voice was a calming presence in his ear. "Don't force it. Find the sweet spot. Feel the wall's frequency. Match it, then slip through the gaps." Izuku reached out a hand, his fingers a blur of motion. He could feel the wall, not as a solid object, but as a dense, buzzing cloud of energy. He adjusted his own frequency, tuning it like a radio dial, searching for the right station. The resistance lessened. The buzzing of the wall's atoms and the whine of his own began to harmonize. He took a step forward. His hand sank into the concrete. A gasp of pure wonder escaped his lips. There was no sensation of touch, only a strange, cool numbness, a feeling of displacement. It was like dipping his hand into a pool of static. He could see the outline of his hand on the other side of the wall, ghostly and translucent. "You've got it!" Barry cheered. "Now, the rest of your body. Commit to it. Don't hesitate. Hesitation is what gets you stuck." Izuku's heart pounded in his chest. He took another breath and walked forward, pushing his entire body into the dense, buzzing cloud of the wall. For a terrifying, disorienting second, he was one with the concrete and steel. He was everywhere and nowhere, a ghost in the machine of the wall itself. He could sense the rebar skeleton, the pockets of trapped air, the stress points in the structure, and then, he was out. He stumbled forward, his feet finding solid ground on the other side. He whipped around, his eyes wide with disbelief, and looked at the 10-foot-thick wall he had just passed through as if it were a curtain. I did it," he breathed. "That you did," Barry said. "Now do it again. And again. And again. Until it's as natural as breathing." The next few hours were a grueling exercise in failure and success. His first major mistake came when he tried to phase through a more complex object, one of the lab's large equipment consoles. He misjudged the different frequencies of the metal casing, the plastic keyboard, and the delicate circuitry within. Halfway through, his concentration wavered for a split second. The result was agonizing. His arms solidified inside the machine. Pain, white-hot and electric, shot up his shoulder. Alarms blared as the console short-circuited in a shower of sparks. He cried out, his body trapped, the feeling of cold, dead metal fused with his own living tissue, a unique and profound form of horror. "Don't panic!" Barry was by his side in a flash, his own hand vibrating as he phased it into the console. "Focus, Deku! Find the frequency again! Match me!" Barry's calm, powerful vibration acted as a tuning fork. Izuku, gritting his teeth against the pain, focused on Barry's energy, and forced his own arm to begin vibrating again. With a sickening slurp, his arm pulled free. He collapsed to his knees, panting, cradling his arm, which felt numb and strangely cold. What happened?" Izuku asked, his voice shaking. "You lost focus," Barry explained, his expression serious. "When you phase, you are literally walking between raindrops in a hurricane. The moment you stop believing you can, you get wet. Your molecules started to resolidify inside the consoles. A few more seconds and you would have been permanently bonded. We would have had to cut you out." The lesson was a harsh one, but it stuck. Control was everything. Belief was everything. From that moment on, Izuku approached every phasing attempt with a new level of zen-like focus. He started small, phasing a pen through a desk, a coin through his own hand. He learned to feel the unique atomic song of every object, to dance with it, not fight it. The next lesson was on the Speed Force aura. They moved to a different section of the lab, this one containing a long track and several life-sized, weighted rescue dummies. "Okay, so we know the aura protects you," Barry began, pacing back and forth. "It negates friction, it absorbs impacts. It's why you can run at Mach 5 and your clothes don't incinerate, and your face doesn't peel off. But it's more than just a personal shield. It's a tool. You can extend it," he demonstrated. He picked up one of the heavy, 200-pound dummies. "On its own, this is dead weight. If I run with this at super speed without extending my aura, the G-forces would tear it to pieces. It'd be like putting a tomato in a blender. He began to vibrate, his scarlet aura flaring to life. The aura visibly expanded, enveloping the dummy in a soft, red glow. But if I extend the field, he said, I'm not just carrying the dummy. The dummy is inside my protective bubble. It experiences the same lack of inertia that I do. With that, he vanished. He ran the length of the 500-meter track and was back in the blink of an eye, the dummy perfectly intact, not even its plastic hair out of place. Your turn, Barry said, gesturing to another dummy. Izuku approached the dummy. It was heavy, designed to simulate an unconscious adult. He wrapped his arms around it and tried to activate his speed. The result was clumsy. He managed a short, lurching burst of speed for about 10 feet before the dummy's sheer inertia threw him off balance. You're thinking of it as two separate things, Barry corrected. You and the dummy. You have to think of it as one. The aura is an extension of your will. See the dummy as part of yourself. Protect it like you'd protect your own arm. Izuku closed his eyes. He thought about all the times he had carried injured people from battlefields. He remembered carrying Bakugo during the practical exams, the feeling of responsibility, the desperate need to keep him safe. He channeled that feeling, that protective instinct. He activated his full cowling, the green-gold lightning flaring to life. This time, he didn't just let it sheathe his body. He pushed it outward, visualizing it as a blanket, a protective cocoon of energy wrapping around the dummy. The aura shimmered, expanding to encompass the inanimate object. He could feel it, a connection to the dummy through the speed force field. It felt lighter. Not physically, but kinetically. He took a breath and ran. This time, it was smooth. The dummy felt almost weightless, an extension of his own momentum. He blazed down the track, a green-gold comet, the world blurring past him. He executed a sharp turn at the end of the track, a move that should have sent the dummy flying, but it remained firmly in his grasp, held steady by the kinetic bubble. He ran back to the start, a triumphant grin on his face. That's it! Barry applauded. Now level 2. Saving multiple people. He indicated 3 dummies, placed several yards apart. An explosion. 3 victims, critical condition. You have 2 seconds to get them all to the designated safe zone 50 meters away. Go. Izuku's supercharged mind immediately started calculating trajectories, pickup angles, and aura extension capacity. He couldn't carry all 3 at once. He'd have to make trips. But was that the most efficient way? No, he thought. Don't think like a person. Think like a speedster. He exploded into motion. He ran to the first dummy, his aura flaring to scoop it up. But instead of running it to the safe zone, he ran to the second dummy. As he passed it, he extended his aura again, a shimmering lasso of light that snagged the second dummy and pulled it into his kinetic slipstream. Now he had 2. He repeated the process for the third, a trio of rescue dummies now trailing behind him in a protected, weightless procession. He deposited all 3 in the safe zone with milliseconds to spare. Barry whistled, impressed. A speed vortex train. Kid, you're not just learning the rules, you're starting to write your own. I've never even thought of doing that. Izuku felt a flush of pride, but his mind was already moving on. The vortexes. Creating vortexes is about displacing air with speed, Barry explained, standing in the center of a large, circular chamber designed to withstand hurricane-force winds. Simple principle, difficult execution. Rotate your arms fast enough, you create a vacuum. Air rushes in to fill it, and you get a whirlwind. Useful for putting out fires, disarming multiple opponents, or providing a soft landing. Izuku tried it. He stood and rotated his arms, faster and faster, a green blur of motion. At first, all he created was a stiff breeze that ruffled his hair. Faster! Barry yelled over the growing wind. It's not just about arm speed. Put your whole body into it. Channel the speed force into the rotation. Izuku dug his feet in, pouring more and more energy into the movement. The breeze became a gale. Loose objects in the chamber began to rattle. The wind whipped into a controlled cyclone, a swirling column of air that rose to the ceiling. It was raw, powerful, and utterly chaotic. He was creating the storm, but he wasn't directing it. Now, the hard part. Control. Barry shouted. Don't just make a tornado, aim it. Use your hands to shape the flow. Push the top of it to the left. Izuku focused, adjusting the angle of his hands, using them like rudders. The top of the vortex wavered, then bent to the left, slamming into a target on the wall with a satisfying whump. Good! Now a barrier! Create a horizontal vortex in front of you! Izuku changed his arm motion, creating a spinning wall of wind that deflected a series of rubber projectiles fired from the wall. He was learning. It was a physical and mental drain, a full-body workout that left him panting, but he was learning to paint with the wind. The idea of solidified speed-force constructs, however, was what truly captured his imagination. This is a high-level technique, Deku, Barry warned. Most speedsters never manage it. You're not just manipulating your environment, you're creating matter from pure energy. It's quantum mechanics meets sheer force of will. He held up his hand, and a shimmering, scarlet-tinged dagger of solidified lightning materialized in his palm. The speed force is potential energy. With enough focus, you can give it form. Your thoughts become things. The more complex the object, the more concentration it takes. Izuku was mesmerized. This was creation from nothing. It was the ultimate support ability. His first attempt was a disaster. He tried to create a simple shield. He focused, pictured a round, green-gold shield, and pushed the energy from his hands. The result was a pathetic, shimmering blob of light that flickered and died in less than a second. You're thinking too hard about the shield, Barry diagnosed. Don't think shield. Think stop. You're not building an object. You're giving the speed force a command and a shape. You want to stop something? Project that intent. Project that certainty. Izuku tried again. This time, he didn't picture the object. He focused on the concept. Protection. Barrier. Unbreachable. He thought about standing in front of civilians, being their wall against the villain's attack. He pushed his will, his heroic desire to protect, into the energy. A disk of brilliant, emerald and gold light snapped into existence in front of him. It was stable, solid, and hummed with power. He tentatively tapped it. It felt like solid glass. A turret in the wall fired a high-velocity projectile at him. Acting on pure instinct, Izuku threw the shield up. The projectile slammed into it and disintegrated on impact, the shield not even shuddering. A wide, incredulous grin spread across Izuku's face. He had done it. Mei Hatsume's voice squealed with delight over the comms. His biometrics went off the charts with that one. The energy output was incredible. Oh, the babies we could build with this principle. Self-replicating armor. Instantaneous weapon generation. Izuku began to experiment, his mind racing with possibilities. He created a ramp to run up, a cage to trap a training bot, a series of stepping stones in midair. His constructs were simple, geometric, but they were real. He was no longer just a hero who could punch hard and run fast. He was becoming an artist, and the speed force was his medium. The final, and most crucial, lesson was not a physical one. It took place in a quiet meditation room, with just him and Barry. All of this, the phasing, the constructs, the speed, it's useless if this isn't fast enough, Barry said, tapping his own temple. Your body can move at the speed of light, but if your brain is still moving at the speed of sound, you'll just be the fastest crash in history. You've been doing it subconsciously, but now you need to learn to control it. The speed of thought. How do I practice thinking faster? Izuku asked, perplexed. We overload you with information, Barry said with a slightly mischievous grin. He led Izuku to a chair in the center of a domed room. The dome was a 360-degree holographic projector. Nisa's little toy, Barry explained. I've made some modifications. Izuku sat down, and the dome came to life. He was suddenly floating in a sea of data. Complex physics equations, historical texts, tactical maps, and news reports from around the world swirled around him. Read it, Barry said. All of it. At once. That's impossible. Not for you. Not anymore. Let the speed force into your mind, Deku. Let it accelerate your synapses. Don't read word by word. Absorb. Process. Izuku closed his eyes and did as he was told. He let the humming energy flow not just through his body, but into his brain. The chaotic swirl of data began to organize. The blur of text sharpened. He wasn't just seeing the information, he was understanding it. He absorbed a book on quantum field theory in the time it took to blink. He memorized the entire subway map of Tokyo in a single glance. He cross-referenced the villain's past 3 attacks and predicted their next target based on probability and resource analysis. His mind, his greatest asset, was now unbound by the sluggish pace of normal cognition. He saw connections he'd never seen before, formulated strategies in nanoseconds, and processed tactical information with the speed and efficiency of a supercomputer. He opened his eyes. The data swirl was gone. The room was quiet. "How long was I out?" he asked, feeling a little disoriented. "About 30 seconds," Barry replied, looking impressed. "You just absorbed the entire contents of the UA digital library. How do you feel?" "I feel..." Izuku trailed off, trying to find the words. "I feel like I was blind, and now I can see. I can see everything." The training had pushed him to his absolute limits, physically, mentally, and spiritually. He was no longer just Izuku Midoriya, the inheritor of One for All. He was something more. The fusion of the Speed Force and the sacred torch he carried had created a hero unlike any the world had ever known. He was a tactician who could formulate a plan before his enemies even knew a fight had begun. He was a protector who could build a fortress out of thin air. He was a rescuer who could pluck a dozen people from harm's way in a single heartbeat. As he stood there, feeling the quiet, controlled power thrumming within him, he finally understood. The Speed Force hadn't just made him faster. It had given him the tools to truly fulfill his lifelong dream, to be a hero who could save everyone. He finally had the power to match his will. And he knew, with a chilling certainty, that he was going to need every ounce of it.